there are a few common AI words that ChatGPT was using early on, such as harness or leverage or some of these. That when you spot them in a copy, you say, yep, that's ChatGPT. I've been using leverage for 20 years. And now I have to avoid using leverage so that I don't sound like a bot because it flags different systems that it's a bot-built content, right? So these are proper words in the English language used by professional writers, professors, journalists, and editors that should now withdraw them from content for a while until AI gets trained on more mediocre slang content so that these words are free to use once again.
So how do you approach it in a human way?
I am a firm believer of providing education ahead of time and running sales in a consultative approach, meaning that you need to educate people and provide value and help out, not just in a salesy manner, but actually having a public statement, a public position on how things are being done and why a certain model is the right one.
James Schramko here. Welcome back to my podcast. Today we are lucky to have a special guest, first time on the show. Welcome, Mario Peshev. Good to have you here.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me. It's definitely a pleasure.
I always love chatting to you. We get to chat on a regular basis. We're often talking about online marketing, and you've got quite an interesting operation going on there. I'll let you share a little more about that. But working, I guess, with some really interesting accounts across multiple disciplines. I was very lucky to read your book recently called MBA Disrupted. And it's clear that you are an authority in terms of your experience with startup and these enterprise level solutions across multiple categories. But I wonder, how do you best describe the service that you've been offering there at devrix.com?
Yeah, absolutely. And first off, thanks for the compliments on the book. You know how it goes. You spend several years writing it, and you can use all the good karma afterwards. So
I respect anyone who puts effort into making a decent book. I mean, these days people are doing push of the button books, and that's one way to do it. And I'm sure it's great for some marketers, and then other people doing little sales brochures. But your book, it's like an almanac of deep knowledge. Kind of, I read it slowly because there's just so much depth in it. And you get through the book and you think, gosh, you've really gone out there, learnt a lot, applied a lot, and you've brought back experiences. And it was such a good read, and I was thrilled to get my hands on it early and to be able to write something nice about it, which was all true, because I do read quite a lot of books, so obviously evidenced by my bookshelf. And it's good to see that. And so, yeah, massive respect for anyone who publishes a book like that.
Well, it's funny you said that, and I've never said that in public, so it's going to be exclusive for you essentially. But I tried to make it an AI book first. So again, the non-public statement is, my agency is doing a lot of stuff. So we're doing MarTech consultancy, WordPress, HubSpot, SEO, like lots of different things. Our retainers are pretty exciting, I would say. But, AI is one of the areas we try to push very hard on. It's just one of the things that, for obvious reasons, we're spending a lot of attention and we are bending different tools and whatnot. And I even gave 2 different talks on AI last week at different events. One of them was building a custom GPT bot that was trained on my book and my blog, and you can interact with it in it's essentially an avatar that looks like me and is moving like me, trained on my voice, trained on my content. So it's pretty meta when you think of it. But these are the extents to where we try to adopt AI for different use cases, right? And in some cases it works, in some cases it doesn't. Like building a book is not the right way to go for it. And, we tried, failed. That's why I wrote the actual book. But the story to that is, because we've been using Jasper and, of course, later on ChatGPT and Gemini and stuff to write outlines and some other things, I said, okay, how far can we go with an AI book? So obviously I pressed the button. There are tools for that. It was extremely crappy, right? And, I've tried that with different topics. It didn't work. Then I said, okay, I'm going to take it to the next step. I'm going to feed 1,300 pages of my content. So I've been writing my blog since 2006, business content for the past 7 or 8 years, strategic content, all that for the past 5 years. copy on Entrepreneur, Forbes, and all that stuff. So, I got my VA to plug that into a Google Doc file. I trained Gemini, I trained OpenAI, I worked with like other teams trying to package that into a book. It failed. Then I worked with a contractor that specializes in AI-driven books, and I gave them the file and said, "This is everything I've written on that. It's essentially 20 different books. So let's try to see if we can do anything." So they tried, and surprisingly, it wasn't that bad, right? So it wasn't useful, like it's not something I can publish, but it was putting things into perspective. It tried to combine certain topics and some certain narratives in a way that's consistent and coherent, right? Same opening, same conclusion at the end, summarizing the copy. So it wasn't horrible. So what I did essentially is, first off, I gave up on the AI idea. Second, I used the general outline as an inspiration of, okay, these are the general topics. So I'm going to move them a little bit around. I'm going to break down the service topics and stuff. But I also drove inspiration from starting and ending a topic and the summaries and some other aspects that the AI was just trained to do. Like, I'm kind of paraphrasing the AI. I've studied millions and millions and millions of books, and I'm building these because there's so much content that's structured this way. So this tells me, okay, when I read that, it sounds robotic, it sounds unauthentic, but the hook itself, the copywriting framework isn't bad. So I'm going to infuse a little bit of that in my content. And the worst part was I had to rewrite my content that I already had into that chapter book format, following some of the principles in the AI. So it was extremely meta. It definitely bugged my brain. But once again, we need to bend AI to the maximum and see where it breaks.
Well, I think this is a really interesting topic, and it's directly on our subject matter today, because we're really talking about the subtle differences between human and robots and where we're up to at this point. We're at a juncture where big companies like Apple are wanting to pass on our details to AI and incorporate it into the features. We've been told in some of the Creative Suite products, I think Adobe or whatever, they want to own the rights to anything you put into their machine to train the machine. So we're definitely in a crossover period, an interesting period. And people like you and I think we can see the usefulness of these tools. But one way that I've been thinking about it is, well, let's say with your book, probably hard for you to end up with the perfect book with AI as the starting point, even if you feed it all your stuff, because you're still a human and there's going to be subtle things that you're going to want to convey in that message, even if it's not the perfect robotic framework that every other book uses. I mean, there has to have been outliers or books that didn't follow the normal pattern that have been very successful. I'm sure we could think of a few, but the point is, I think with experts in particular, the tools are fantastic for research, for frameworks, for crunching big amounts of data, getting to a useful working output. But then I think the expertise where we come into it is to say, well, this is actually good or bad. This part's good. This part needs a bit of help. This could be polished a bit, and then we can humanize it. And so I feel like there's probably a lot of people who are thinking they can just push the button, get the output, and that's enough. I did notice the other day I was posting something on Instagram on my surf channel, and it had a little button to say, flag this if it was created by AI. Clearly, they're onto this. And I've seen a lot of pictures in my social feed lately that are obviously AI generated pictures, and they look rubbish as well. It's actually obvious, even to a human eye, this was created by AI, someone who's not very good at driving prompt or using a crappy tool. And it fascinates me that such an intelligent machine still can't spell with the image, but it's getting close. But what I wanted to talk about is some of the stuff you've been doing is SEO, and I thought that was interesting. You've definitely been in the web dev stuff. Now, I've heard people saying you don't need to be a coder or developer now. You can just tell AI and it'll create the code for you and you can publish it. I did try some tools that way and they actually worked, which blew me away. I just thought of tools I wanted, like a clock to track the time in all the different regions, and it created the code output. I gave it to my developer. She put it on the website and it worked. But I think it might be dangerous at this point to be over-reliant on the end output as the final output. I just want to know your thoughts on that, because one thing you do better than most people I know is relationship marketing. And I think that's probably a real differentiator.
Yeah, lots of good thoughts here. So first and foremost, when it comes to AI and how we use it, I do agree you can get a prototype out of everything, and it's going to be a working version, but it's going to be crappy. Very similar to the book that I mentioned, right? So the narrative insight wasn't too bad. Like you can get probably 80% of the insights, especially when it was trained on my content already. You can get 80% of the insights, but it was boring, it was tedious, it was repetitive. You were just skimming through data like, yeah, I already read that. That sentence too long. That paragraph just too verbose. And it's not a pleasant experience, right? From a technical standpoint, it looks similarly, and the end output you get works in a very specific situation, in a very specific use case. What I can say is that over the past 24 hours, I've had 3 website outages for certain clients that tried to play with AI or kind of self DIY tools and stuff. And one other solution with a client working with a vendor that used AI to build their plugin. So it's a combined 4 cases where we charged more or less a premium for last minute jumping on an emergency for something that could have been built properly. And they led to outages. Some of these outages were several minutes, some were longer. And it's unfortunate that, saving cash on something that's an established industry is kind of creating the perception that something works while it doesn't. And I often do references back, right now I'm at the Devrix HQ. The vast majority of the team is on site, so we're kind of on site. But back when I started in 2010, we were remote, and remote wasn't really a thing back then. It wasn't popular and whatnot. And I was preaching remote heavily. So I still am, but I'm trying to kind of balance it out. And back then I was giving examples with, hey, if surgeons can do surgeries and perform them remotely with telemedicine and all that stuff, because I knew people, professional surgeons who were giving talks and doing that, then everyone can do remote. So in a similar fashion, if you believe that you can do coding and content and stuff with high quality with AI, would you trust it to do your math and do your taxes? Would you trust it to be your legal lawyer? And the answer is normally no. And Google's I/O talk from last month was a great primer on that. They launched AI overviews all over the board, a search engine kind of feature that's directly feeding you the answer. And most of the large international and global media posted hundreds of examples of dumb answers that Google's yielding back, such as you need, and sorry for doing that on a podcast, but you need to drink urine for some medical problems. I don't remember which one exactly, like lung stones or something like that. Or you need to put glue on pizza. Or, if you eat a frog, it's poisonous, and like things like that. I can probably try to remember a few cases, but if you count on AI to try to decipher information and not a medical journal or not a legal professional, you are going to probably kill yourself and end up in jail. So it's a good guidance, but it's not really yielding enough helpful details. And again, as part of the experiments, because when you take a look at Devrix, for example, it's ranked as top 20 agencies for 8 or 9 years now across the board. So it's everywhere. It's kind of most listicles, most top agencies list and stuff. So considering that AI is supposed to be trained on that information, you'd expect that we show up in most places. And in some cases, it's right. But when I try to just break the system and try to type down every single query on the matter, I often end up, hey, what's the best WordPress agency for something? Or what are the best WordPress agency providers for yada, yada? In some cases, the first result is a hosting company, or is a media publisher, or is a blogger. Then I go in and type back, hey, who are the 5 top business consultants? And ChatGPT or Gemini, their first answer was Steve Ballmer, who was the ex-CEO of Microsoft. And as we can all imagine, the guy is a billionaire. He's not doing business consulting. He may be a thought leader, even though he's not showing up online. But because he's in business and he's been in professional executive role, chatbots just put the two things together and say, hey, he is a business consultant. That's it. And again, I can probably keep enumerating examples for hours and hours and hours at a time, but the case in point is AI is a good driver right now. It's hallucinating far too much. It's producing crappy quality. But if you know how to use it, you can be faster. You can generate outlines. You can generate concepts and ideas with AI that you pass on to your designer afterwards, and you can keep iterating over and over and over again until you reach a certain point. But it's not a replacement for humans. It's an operating system, just as computers, and laptops, and the internet and software that smart humans need to use and manage to be able to do something. And this is the reason why, as you said, I'm a relationship machine or whatever. Even though I'm an introvert, I believe so much in the power of relationships that I'm forcing myself to go out there and build meaningful connections to actual human beings instead of being deceived by AI answers.
Well, I think this is what got my attention and why I invited you on the show, because I think of organic food. It's kind of come full circle. We used to have organic food, and then they went and messed it all up with chemicals and stuff and modified it. And now organic food's desirable and a premium. I can still buy milk locally here that hasn't been like homogenized and stuff, and it's got cream on the top, and it's highly prized. And I can buy meat that's been grass fed, grass finished, and it's a premium. That's the way I feel about humans right now in my business. For example, I still have all the humans we had for the last 10 to 15 years. We don't have a chat bot. If someone fills out a request for support, they're getting human support. And right now with my coaching, when I'm coming to the live group calls, you see me there. It's not a hologram. But in between with the async communications, it's still me. And even though I will use the tools to help me research, I'll use them to check lists or see what's missing, but I'll still hand finish, and even I'll especially disclose if I've used the tool as well, because it requires judgment and expertise. I have seen some people teaching coaches that they can have a one-man business using AI for all of their team and all of their capacity to deliver. And that, I think, is not a good idea at this stage. But I think what you're talking about, the new organic, is an actual human being reaching out. I mean, I get these dribbly templates every day. Hey, James, I loved your podcast with Mario. I loved how he talked about the importance of humans over AI, and that it's better to write a book by yourself than just rely on the tool. And by the way, that reminds me, pitch. You know, it's like they're just pointing a tool at it and just hitting a button, and you can tell. Can you tell me what your process has been? If you want to share it, obviously you don't have to share anything that's IP protected, but how are you building your network and relationships in human factors? Because you're located in Bulgaria, right? So you've got clients all around the world. You're using online platforms and LinkedIn, I think you're particularly strong on, or were, and have noticed some changes there. But are we going to be in an era where human means more than anything? Is that where it's going, or are tools just going to get better and then it'll fade out? That's what I'm curious about.
Great points once again. And I'll start with the human versus robot element. I definitely agree on the guest post request, link building pitches. I have two pet peeves that are really pissing me off. In the morning, I wake up scrolling through my email, and I always have outsourced development providers from different countries pitching me with, hey, I have 7 years of web development in like 73 different languages and yada, yada. That's one of them. The other one is the guest post pitch. And I've been trying to filter them out like crazy from my inbox with like guest posts and link building requests and like a bunch of these. And they always keep creeping on, and there are dozens a week just always on in my inbox. So absolutely ridiculous. And the worst part is, before AI, this was still happening with virtual assistants and kind of outsourced, email clickers doing the same thing with email templates. So it was worse that people, actual human beings, were wasting time on writing crappy templates. That's pissing me off. In terms of the use of AI, I'm 100% convinced that humans are always going to be needed for one simple reason. Using AI that's doing the same thing at large is going to lead to a saturation point very quickly. Everything that works out there in the world is a unique/creative idea in a blue ocean, something that people in your market from your followers haven't seen yet, or have probably only seen once and twice, and it still hasn't really made a bad impression. But right now, it's something that, again, the more you abuse it, the more you use the same framework, the same system, the same outreach email, the same template, the same even webinar pricing, it is just putting people off, especially experienced people, especially the one that are able to pay 6-7 figures more. And this is why we always need humans. Whatever AI is capable to deliver, we'll see large cohorts of outsourced low-cost agencies doing that at bulk for millions of websites and campaigns and users. It's going to reach saturation point in a matter of weeks, and it's going to be a bad idea using that in practice. And I'm going to give a very simple example. There are a few common AI words that ChatGPT was using early on, such as hardness or leverage, or some of these. When you spot them in a copy, you say, yep, that's ChatGPT. I've been using leverage for 20 years. And now I have to avoid using leverage so that I don't sound like a bot, because it flags different systems that it's a bot-built content, right? So these are proper words in the English language used by professional writers, professors, journalists, and editors that should now withdraw them from content for a while until AI gets trained on more mediocre slang content so that these words are free to use once again. And that should be a very clear example of how bad it is sometimes with AI, with certain words that are more rare, yet get highlighted as something that's AI-driven content.
That's like whenever I saw the word avail, I knew that it was written in the Philippines. It just seems unique to that market. So how do you approach it in a human way? Let's answer that part of the question.
One of the things that I believe are definitely misplaced in the world of digital marketing and growth is the instant gratification expectation. I understand that large enterprises have been building BDR teams forever, and I know you've been in sales forever as well. So there are certain cases where it makes a lot of sense, right? Like the car salesman model, right? It is a very expensive, luxurious item. It is it's something that requires someone who understands and can compare different models and can take you to a drive.
That one, that's an interesting one. As you were talking before, and I'm really passionate about that. That's why I jumped in. I'd much rather just select my car on a screen and order it online. That was deemed impossible in 2020. I talked about it. I said we should put terminals in the showroom and let people just configure their car, because I can do it at Gran Turismo at home on my computer. I can on my console. At home, I can build a car, change the color. It does a 360 around, and I can put all the different accessories on it. Why can't we do that in the showroom? We don't need these pesky salespeople. They're annoying and also broadly disliked by the public. I would rather not have a human in a car showroom. In fact, you can now actually order a Mercedes-Benz on a computer screen. Great. Supermarket, though, I'll be damned if I'm checking my own groceries out. They were supposed to pass the savings on to us, but in Australia, at least, they gouge you even more, and they won't front up for staff. So I always just go in less regularly and take my shopping trolley, and I go to the one with the conveyor belt, and a person checks out my stuff, because I feel like that human intervention is still great. By the way, I remember there was a big uproar about that service assistant-less shops, the ones where you just pick stuff up and walk out. apparently there's a back office where they're looking on cameras to actually do it all manually. Like it's pretend technology, which is a whole other category we haven't even talked about.
Yeah, it's crazy. Sometimes AI is operated by more humans than it isn't. And so first, back to the content generation. We had an interview with an experienced SEO manager yesterday, like 15 years of experience and previously a journalist. And she's kind of said the same thing, right? We've been doing SEO for a decade. We have content writers and all that, and we have a very efficient process. We know how to build outlines. We know how to do keyword research, competitor research, market research, all the things that we do here internally. And she said, whenever we have a client who's very kind of pushy and really insists on using AI, it actually takes us much longer to adapt and edit that AI-driven content compared to building that from scratch, particularly for industries that are well-known or topics where you can find data in SERP. And the funny thing is right now, AI is abused in a way that requires a lot more human capital to go over and fix AI issues versus actually saving human time. And that's something that's pretty intriguing. And as to kind of our process and running the lead generation and growth and all that, I'm a firm believer of providing education ahead of time and running sales in a consultative approach, meaning that you need to educate people and provide value and help out and help on podcasts and webinars and publish in-house data and speak at industry events and showcase expertise, not just in a salesy manner, but actually having a public statement, a public position on how things are being done and why a certain model is the right one. One example here is we coined the term WordPress retainers back in 2015. The concept wasn't there yet. Some people were doing some maintenance. Everyone was doing one-off projects. We got really tired of dealing with scope creep and unclear requirements and a 1-year-long project that changes in the 4th week and all that. And I said, that's it. We're going to start pitching what lawyers have been doing forever, retainers. And we're going to adapt it by merging support and maintenance to agile development, which is what startups do, to professional consultancy, which is what consultants do. So we're going to merge all that together. We're not going to waste months on R&D and scoping out and complex kind of business requirements and all that. And we just did that. And I went on as many podcasts and conferences and WordCamps and WordCamp Europe and stuff to say, this is what we do. This is a model that's been working for us over the past 6 months. Still all of it. This is the entire blueprint. I want to make more agencies happy and profitable and build more competition because this is the right model. So it's best for the customer. It's going to create less friction for us selling and less time kind of justifying why we don't spend 4 hours building a specification for a 2-year long project. So sometimes it's more contradictory building in public and kind of showcasing and really, showing what you're building behind the surface. But when you think of it, when you think as a buyer, buyers don't want to be sold. As you said, I just want to play Gran Turismo or some 360 and build my car there. They don't want to be pitched. Again, no link building requests and all that stuff. You want to gain insights and knowledge from a trustworthy individual or set of individuals. You want to be able to read reviews and receive information from public sources and all that stuff. So when we just take a brief moment to think like a buyer, then it's really easy to see that the outreach process or the bottom of the funnel PPC ads are flowed by design. Instead, you need to spend more time educating your audience, building use cases and comparison studies, and building guest posts just to showcase your expertise to the given audience. And again, hopping on Slack communities and do everything it takes to create an aura, a cloud of a trusted individual, and then people will come. This is one of these cases where build it and they'll come is actually true. Whenever these customers are in market, which is always 5% of the customers in a given space, these prospects are going to reach out to you because you've been a trusted individual they can trust and not someone who's pushing them back and they'll never call back afterwards.
So there's a lot of nuggets in there. I'll see if I can sort of paraphrase this. Start with a great product, obviously, because you're implying that because you're generating case studies. Obviously, a case study where someone says this product's rubbish is not a good case study. So you need a good product. You want use cases that's, in layman's terms, that's people who have used your product and are typical of other people who might also use that product, and you showcase them by sharing into your networks, and putting together good, high quality, high caliber content that's probably at least human finished and polished nicely for the world. And then you're giving away and sharing that information. It sounds actually very similar to what I've been doing, content marketing, for so long. I try and do that on this podcast. I'm hoping that there'll be a few insights that we share today that will be useful for someone. And when they become in that buying window and they're ready, they think, well, this is the person I want to deal with. And so that takes the pressure off having to do top of funnel branding and awareness to try and take someone that whole journey of, oh, this is who I am, this is why you should trust me, this is whatever, and then take them through their funnel, the ascension model, and all the other words you want to put for it. And I'm sure there's a place for that to amplify. But I guess at the core, it's just having a great product and having people using the product and sharing it. And one of the clients that I coached, they had profound growth in their business by just taking one client per week and talking about it in an email and sharing it with their prospect list, and then making a little video on social media talking about that case study. Sometimes it's the customer, but it doesn't even have to be. You could actually share that story about a client use case if they don't want to, as long as you've got permission, or you could even anonymize it, which I did for a podcast once that was very successful. It was just all a case study framework. But I think this is very similar to a test drive in a car. You're getting to test drive it before you buy it. You hear a case study or a use case, you think, am I like that person? Would I like that same result? And do I trust these people? And if you keep getting that information over time, then you do go into that buyer's window, bang, people land on board, and sometimes it's built up over quite some time. So you're doing quite a few reach points with Slack groups and LinkedIn and speaking in person and podcasts. And over time, I guess you're exposing yourself, building out a big awareness around you, but sharing good intelligence the whole time.
On the agency side, we have several clients who have already invested 7 figures in us, right? So when you close 7-figure deals, it's not selling a $9.99 drop shipping product through an Instagram ad. It's a different buying cycle. It takes much longer. It takes a lot more touch points. Probably 20 years ago, back when I was actually studying software engineering and kind of taking my first dives at jobs in that, I read some studies by Microsoft and IBM and some other software groups saying, kind of disclosing the rule of 7. You need at least 7 touch points before a prospect even considers you as a buying decision. And this was 20 years ago. I believe it was studied early on, even in Hollywood, back in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, when TV series and kind of Hollywood movies, they needed to tap into certain angles a few times before people actually go to the movies. And there are a lot of other psychological studies, but what I'm saying is that if decades ago it took at least 7 touch points to reach a customer, don't expect in 2024, with AI and TikTok and Instagram and all the other networks and the short attention span, to take fewer than 20 touch points, in some cases over 40 touch points, before someone even considers you as a potential vendor, partner, SaaS solution or so. And again, most people underappreciate that level of effort and that time to build brand awareness and brand affinity, especially in times when money is scarce and we are in a recessionary state and layoffs and lower funding, higher interest rates, and everything else that's happening in the economy. So yeah, that human momentum and that consistent longevity in sticking to what your customer would need, a longer period of time to study you, to find you, to consider you, and then staying top of mind, as John Hall's infamous book states, then just being top of mind at all times through education and inspiration and thought leadership and stuff is going to help you so that when customers are in the right spot, they are going to pick you as a vendor. Sixth Sense study from earlier this year, I believe, maybe from January or February, they said that the average buying cycle for even for products over 10K ARR, so I consider that cheap, honestly, like unless you're in D2C. So even for that level of products, we're not talking millions. The average software research cycle, the average time to close a deal in 2024 is a year. And it takes 8 months of due diligence for customers before they even reach out to vendors and shortlist 3 or 4 or 5 vendors. And the first 2 or 3 are brands that they have seen elsewhere. They've already seen their stories, sponsoring events, attending meetups, thought leadership, recommendations, referrals, mentions in Slacks, and all that stuff. So all studies point to the fact that you need to be consistent and not salesy. You don't want to ruin your options. It's like hitting on a hot girl at college, right? You don't want to ruin your chance the moment you fail in the first moment. You won't get a second chance. Or maybe you will in a couple of years, but it's not going to happen soon. So pushing for that to be intrusive and pushy and even dangerous and all that, you don't want that. You want to be helpful, yet interesting. You want to be friendly, yet adventurous. And you want to balance out all these things that you're not the safe or boring option. You're interesting. You don't really need to do sales. And kind of combining all these psychological and emotional efforts in this one. So whether it's easy or not, no, it's not easy. Whether it takes time to build that, it definitely does. But reaching out to people, what I do, and probably the most important part, when someone reaches out to me, my Gmail is already 20 years old. And I use it as my CRM because all the data is flowing to my Gmail. So whenever someone reaches out someplace, the first thing I do is I go to Gmail and I type in their email or domain address, and they see all the history for everything that I've seen or heard for them over the past 20 years. Even if I get a LinkedIn DM, Twitter DM or so, at least I get someone sends you a message in my inbox and I keep it in my archives. So I know for a fact that if someone did something stupid in the past 20 years, I'll find it and they'll know about it. And it doesn't mean that you cannot recover from dumb decisions, but you definitely want to limit the number of dumb decisions you've done over time.
It's a good point you make, how searchable that Gmail is, and why we put our SOPs in Google Drive, because it's such a valuable research tool. I used to actually tag people when I'd meet them at an event with a label. And so later when I did business, I could actually tag the business to that event, which helped me with our export grant in Australia. You just reminded me, I've actually got some clients who take 8 years to come on board a mentorship. 8 years. But then I've also, you can be lucky and get business straight away, but you have to have a few things lined up. I remember in 2008, when I quit my job, I had 2 clients on monthly retainers. I went to them, said, I'll do all your web stuff. I'll do the website or your analytics. I'll run your ads, do your SEO, create content. I'll even manage a VA. And they paid me $5,500 each per month. They weren't WordPress retainers because I wasn't even using WordPress. Back then I was using Excite Pro. This is pre-WordPress. But I was doing retainers nice and early, and I realized that's a perfect solution. And probably I finished retainers as you were starting retainers because it became such a small part of my business model. But I remember at that time that the lawyer, which is another irony, who I signed up, I think they were having pain with their provider. They were already having pain. They weren't happy. They'd asked one of their people at their business about their husband who knew something about it, and that husband knew me. And he asked me a question. I said, "What's this all about? Tell me more." He goes, "Oh, it's to let me speak to them." And I remember speaking to them, and I said, "Okay, now," I was on the phone. I said, "Open up Google and now type in injury lawyer Sydney. And then what I want you to do is click on your website." And there's nothing. They're like, "Are you there?" "Yeah, sorry, I'm just like, I can't see my website." I said, "Okay, we'll try page 2. No. 3? No." I said, "Okay, well, I can fix that." And they said, when can you help us? Let's get started, right? And it was like, but I had the perfect storm. They were already looking for a provider. I don't know how long they'd been looking and whatever, but it came through a trusted referral source. And that's probably the real bias here. they were told this person gets results, and then you can demonstrate the results. So I was able to show them my own websites and affiliate sites and product sites that I was already ranking for. The best thing is they ranked off their face after I helped them. We were like just number one. The ads were killing it. It was just so good. They just left me alone. They'd say, "Come into the city, talk to us." And I said, "No, I'm not going to the city. We can do a virtual conference. There's this thing called a webinar." And I had a GoToMeeting account, and like they'd never heard of it before. 2008, 2009. It's like,
yeah,
such the early days. So I think what you described is really something I can relate to, that just being interesting, posting continual content, being top of mind, being the clear choice when they're ready to do something, and not being pushy. Gosh, I think there's so many gurus that are not in my inbox because they push past the limit. For example, like when someone sends 9 emails on the last day of a launch, I just think, you know what? I'm going to classify that as obnoxious.
yeah.
So I just hit the unsubscribe. That's it. They're out. I don't want to ever hear from them again. They don't share the same values that I do because they're not respecting me. They're not respecting my time. They've put their own needs above mine, and it's obvious. And so they probably do that. I bet you they're the first ones that are going to be doing these push button auto spam stuff. The internet marketers ruin everything. And I think my takeaway from this episode is, as much as the bright, shiny objects has come, as much as people are killing it with all their AI, tricky dicky stuff and all the cool tools that are coming, just keep a handle on what's real for humans. And I think humans for humans is still, if not as important as ever, it's probably going to be more important than ever. And that's what struck me, Mario, in last week's call when you were chatting, just sharing that you're seeing that being the differentiator. And I think I agree with you on that. I feel like this is the time to be human more so than ever, when everyone else is posting rubbish and going with it. And I don't want to discount how valuable the AI is. I use ChatGPT all the time. My team use it. But to the point about things taking longer, like when we did try those tools that scrape your content looking for snippets and stuff, the outputs were so rubbish, we ended up going back to manual. And even though we've got a bigger team than we need to have, and even though we do everything manually, we probably don't have to, I'm actually really comfortable with that. I think that's a good long-term play for us.
It definitely is. And I can certainly double click on what you said. We have already reached or close to reaching the oversaturation point of AI right now. For more experienced people in the digital space, it happened probably 7, 8, or 9 months ago when it got too much. And we just see more and more of them hopping back onto on-site events and real time and just communities where AI is not welcome. What we definitely see in the algorithm changes is, and we actually see that ever since the start of the pandemic, Google got really confused with user behavior during the pandemic. With lockdowns, people were stocking on toilet paper. Google Maps showed no user data because people were not traveling, and lots of other behaviors changed. And this was the inception of Google is not working as it should in critical events like that. And right after the pandemic, AI happened. And then it was all the AI generated content, programmatic SEO, and lots of other things. So just the combination of all these things taken together have definitely led to oversaturation in the web and more people appreciating and spending longer on just real-time human interaction. So once again, if you put yourself in your buyer's shoes, this is going to be probably the best litmus test right now. Do you want to be sold by blatant salespeople? No. Do you want to be pitched continuously with AI-generated automated content? No. How do you want to be sold? What are the interactions that make the more sense? How do you feel the safest when you have these conversations? How are you vetting vendors? Where are you looking for them, right? And of course, you can always talk to your ICPs, meaning your best clients or your top clients or 10 prospective clients, and just say, hey, I'm going to buy you lunch or whatever you want, like send you an Amazon gift card, whatever it is. I really want to learn more about you so that I can provide better services and be more helpful for your industry, right? Just speak to 10 people and it's going to make a world of a difference.
Old school for the win. I love it, Mario.
Always.
So what message would you like to leave someone who's listened this far in episode 1081?
there's a lot of fat in 2024. There's fear. The 2020s have been crazy. And honestly, I see lots of paranoia and fear and depression and anxiety and lack of control in everyone out there. And it's bad for humanity, right? Nobody expected everything that happened over the past few years between wars and again, pandemic and lockdowns, recessions, inflation. I can keep counting on. So take a step back, take a deep breath, and really go back to the foundations. The foundations are what you truly need to succeed. Avoid the shiny object, just as you said, James. Avoid all the other shortcuts and ways to make it work. And go back to being a decent human being who's helpful, who cares about the customers, who cares about your team, and who is building a culture that you want. One of the best opportunities that we see right now is when you're not dependent on traditional SEO or LinkedIn, or when PPC is not performing that well, it's the best time to reset and rebuild in the way you would ideally want it to be. So take that as an opportunity.
I love that. For me, it's we just launched another video in the surfing market, and it's predominantly me chatting about some fins that I like to use in my surfboard. But I do love the human aspect of it. The robot can't ride the surfboard. It can't feel between, under the feet, what that feels like. It takes a human to feel that, to share that human experience to other humans. And I think that's what makes it valuable. So it'd be really interesting. I think for now, humans defeat robots. And I think that's just going to get stronger. It's so good to share with you and to hear your thoughts on this, Mario, because you're in another part of the world. You're in another sector of the business. You've got oodles of experience and connections. And when you collaborate and share ideas like this, I think something magic happens. And I appreciate you very much.
Thank you once again for having me. I love these conversations, and I hope it's going to be helpful for some of the viewers.
There you go. I've been chatting with Mario Peshev from devrix.com over there in Bulgaria. A wonderful human. We meet pretty much every week these days, and some really cool stuff going on. So if you're in the enterprise stuff or the venture startup stuff, look him up and see what he's all about. It won't be hard to find his content. It's probably human started and human finished. Thanks, mate.
There we go. Cheers.
This is James Schramko.